Okay, I want you to picture something for a moment. Just the ultimate contradiction. It's the mid-1960s. The American dream is, it's in full swing.
Right, the whole suburban ideal.
And you've got this man who is, I mean, by every single visible metric, just the gold standard of white-collar respectability. He's working in computer operations.
Which back then was like rocket science.
Exactly. It wasn't like today. This was cutting-edge, elite, kind of mysterious stuff. He's got the wife. He's starting a family, buying a house in New Jersey. He's the guy you wave to while he's mowing his lawn on a Saturday morning.
He is the archetype, the suburban success story.
Yeah.
The man who, followed all the rules and made it.
But then you peel back that layer to scratch the surface of that normal, boring exterior.
And underneath?
Underneath is a heart of absolute darkness. And we're not just talking about a guy with, like, a secret gambling habit.
No, not even close.
We are talking about a man waging a decades-long predatory war against women, crisscrossing New York and New Jersey, all while commuting home in time for dinner. We're talking about the Phantom of the Commuter Belt.
And for the longest time, the public really only knew the end of that story. We knew the headlines from the late 70s, 1980.
The Torso Killer.
The Times Square Ripper. These horrific, gruesome nicknames that, they suggest a monster who's living in the gutter somewhere. But today, well, we basically have to throw that old script out. We have to look at Richard Cottingham through a completely new lens.
Because we're recording this on Saturday, January 17th, 2026. And just 10 days ago, there's a massive development that frankly rewrites the history books on this case.
It does. It changes everything we thought we knew. On January 7th, 2026, authorities officially closed the book on a cold case that has been an open wound in Fair Lawn, New Jersey for 61 years.
Wow.
The 1965 murder of Alys Eberhardt. And the confession, it came from none other than Richard Cottingham.
61 years? You just have to pause on that for a second. That's a lifetime.
It really is.
Entire generations have been born, have lived, and died while this file just sat in a box, gathering dust.
So, okay, the mission for this deep dive isn't just to, recount the horror stories.
Wait, you can find those anywhere.
We need to figure out what this 2026 confession actually tells us, because it feels like it completely recalibrates the entire timeline of his pathology.
It forces a total reconstruction of the profile we built for him. I mean, for years, criminologists, profilers, they all thought Cottingham was a monster of the disco era.
Right, that the grit and grime of 1970s Times Square somehow created him.
Exactly. This confession proves he was already lethal when he was practically a kid himself. It proves the monster was there long before the environment.
So let's dive right into that, this breakthrough, the case that was solved just over a week ago. Who was Alys Eberhardt?
Alys Eberhardt is the victim who should never have been forgotten, but, well, for decades, she was just a question mark. In 1965, she was 18 years old.
Just a kid. A kid. A nursing student at Hackensack Hospital. And everyone I've read about or spoken to, they all described her with this one specific word.
Vibrant.
Vibrant, yeah. She was dedicated to the healing arts. I mean, this was a young woman who had just started her life, and she was filled with that very specific, mid-60s optimism.
And the setting here is so important for understanding the shock of this. It's September 24th, 1965, Fair Lawn, New Jersey.
This is peak post-war suburbia.
It's Leave It to Beaver territory.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the era of unlocked doors. That illusion of safety wasn't just a feeling, it was the foundation of the whole community. And Alys was murdered inside the sanctity of her family's home.
And that must have shattered everything.
It shattered that community sense of security. But despite that shock, despite the best efforts of the police at the time, the trail it went cold almost immediately.
Why? Was it just a lack of technology back then?
Well, partially, yeah. There was no DNA profiling, no surveillance cameras on every doorbell. But it was also what they call a stranger crime. There was no apparent motive other than the violence itself.
No connection between the victim and the killer.
None. So it became a specter haunting that town.
So fast forward to the 2020s. How does a case this cold, I mean, we're talking over half a century, how does it suddenly get solved now in 2026? We usually hear about genetic genealogy cracking these things. Was that it?
No, and that's what makes this investigation so fascinating from like a procedural standpoint. It wasn't an algorithm. It was pure old-fashioned human intelligence.
Really?
This whole thing started because a former classmate of Alys, she simply asked the Fair Lawn police, please don't let this case fade away.
Wow. One person.
That one voice sparked Detective Brian Ripkema and Sergeant Eric Elishewicz to reopen the file back in 2021.
That's incredible. But they had a huge hurdle. Cottingham is what, 79 years old now?
Yep, 79.
He's in Southwood State Prison serving multiple life sentences. He has zero incentive to talk. He's never getting out. So why would he incriminate himself now?
And that's where the psychological chess match, as they call it, comes in. These detectives, they understood who they were dealing with.
We're narcissists.
Of the highest order. He has this deep contempt for law enforcement. He genuinely thinks he's smarter than all of them. He thinks the police have always been incompetent. So the detectives didn't go in there playing bad cop, slamming tables. They went in just to chat.
They played to his ego.
They played to his memory and his arrogance. They spent hours just talking.
Yeah.
Talking about the geography of 1960s New Jersey.
Well, like roads and landmarks.
The roads, the landmarks, the old diners. And Cottingham, he has this predatory intimacy with the map. He remembered everything. He remembers the streets better than people who lived there because he wasn't living on them. He was hunting on them.
That is deeply disturbing. It's like he has a Google Maps archive in his brain from 1965.
Exactly. And once they built that rapport, that vibe of we're just two professionals talking about the old days, they used a technique called holdback evidence.
Okay, let's unpack that for a second, because it sounds like something from a TV show, but it's a real tool. Holdback evidence is the details the police never release to the press, right?
Correct. It's their insurance policy against false confessions. Only the killer and the cops know these specific details. So the detectives, they use this strategy where they intentionally fed Cottingham false information.
So they would lie to him about the crime scene.
They presented false narratives. They might say, we think the killer probably came in through the back window.
Ah, I see.
And Cottingham, being the arrogant perfectionist he is, he couldn't let that stand. He couldn't resist correcting the record to prove how much smarter he was.
He had to show them up.
He interrupted them. He described the exact point of entry, a specific side window that perfectly matched the 1965 crime scene diagrams the public had never, ever seen.
So his need to be right was stronger than his need to stay silent.
His narcissism is his Achilles heel. Every time. But the real clincher, it was a visual detail. Cottingham described a specific article of clothing that Alys was wearing inside the house. Again, not public knowledge.
Wait, 61 years later, he can still see what she was wearing?
Uh-huh.
That says something terrifying about his memory.
It's what we call a visual trophy. For a sexual sadist like Cottingham, the act doesn't end when the victim dies. He preserves the memory, he replays it, he curates it in his mind.
So it's not just a memory, it's an object he keeps.
It's a trophy. And that detail about her clothing, it proved, undeniably, that he was the only other person in that room with her in her final moments.
And he also told them how he found her. This wasn't a random break-in.
No, not at all. It was what he called a hunt and track methodology.
Sure.
He spotted her by chance outside Hackensack Hospital.
So he just saw her on the street.
Saw her, liked her look, maybe it was the nurse's uniform, maybe just her vibrancy, as her friends called it, and he stalked her. He followed her from that very public space all the way to the privacy of her own home.
That transition from spotting a target in public, following them, all the way to invading their home, it shows a level of commitment that's just, it's frightening.
It shows patience.
Yeah.
And it brings us to the bigger picture here. This confession, it doesn't just solve one very old case.
Yeah.
It completely shatters the profile we had of him.
Right, because the old theory was always that he started slow. Maybe he was a peeping Tom in his 20s, maybe assault in his late 20s, and then finally murder in the 70s.
That's the traditional escalation model for serial offenders.
Yeah.
But the Eberhardt confession just, it blows that up.
Yeah.
Cottingham was 18 years old in 1965.
18.
He was a teenager himself. Yet he was executing a home invasion murder with such precision that he left zero forensic trace. He didn't work up to murder. He started at the absolute top of the violence scale.
He arrived fully formed.
He was a lethal threat from day one. When you look at the years immediately following 1965, you see this wasn't just a one-off. It was the beginning of an evolution.
Right, just 2 years later, 1967, Nancy Vogel.
Nancy was 29, a young mother. But the setting changes here.
Alys was a home invasion.
Nancy Vogel was found strangled in her car in Ridgefield Park. And this marks a major transition for him. He's moving into the mobile environment.
So he realizes that cars are these little isolated bubbles where he can take control.
A car is a private space moving through a public world. It's perfect for him.
And then just a year after that, 1968, we get the Diane Cusick case. And this one is a particular kind of nightmare because it happened at a mall.
The Green Acres Mall, out on Long Island. This was his mall predator phase. Diane Cusick was 23, a mother, and very petite, only 98 pounds. She had just gone to the mall to buy a pair of shoes.
And here he uses a technique that is just. It's incredibly dangerous because it exploits our social conditioning, the authority ruse.
It weaponizes our instinct to obey. Cottingham approached Diane in the parking lot, and he posed as a security guard or an undercover police officer.
And he accuses her of stealing.
Accused her of stealing the very shoes she had just bought.
Now, you have to put yourself in her position. A man who looks official approaches you, acts like an authority figure, accuses you of a crime. Your instinct isn't to run.
No, it's to clear your name. You think, I didn't do anything wrong, I have the receipt, if I just explain this, this will all be fine. You trust the social contract.
And he manipulated that trust.
He used it to get her into her car. He probably said, just get in the car, we'll sort this out, or I need to check your vehicle. And that moment of compliance, that's all he needed to overpower her.
It's a total betrayal of the rules we all live by. He used her own innocence against her. And we should say, this case was actually solved with DNA back in 2022, but seeing it now in the context of the 1965 confession, you see this pattern of rapid evolution in his method.
He was constantly testing boundaries, homes, cars, malls. He was treating the entire tri-state area, New Jersey, Manhattan, Long Island, as one giant hunting ground.
Which brings us to the part of this story that I find the most baffling. The part I think listeners really struggle with. While he is doing all of this, stalking nurses, posing as a security guard, murdering women, he is living this incredibly normal, successful life.
The bifurcated life?
Yeah.
This is the mask of sanity that psychologists always talk about. Cottingham wasn't a drifter. He wasn't living on the margins. He was hyper-respectable.
In 1966, he starts working for MetLife. By 67, he's at Blue Cross Blue Shield.
As a computer operator.
And again, for younger listeners, computer operator in the 1960s wasn't just some office job. This was special.
It was like being in an elite priesthood. You were working with these room-sized mainframe computers, IBM 360s. The environment was climate-controlled, sealed off. It was high-tech. To be a computer operator meant you had specialized knowledge, you had discipline, high intelligence. It implied a certain social status.
So did the job actually help him get away with it? Or was it just a coincidence?
No, it was the perfect cover. I mean, think about the logistics. Computer operations often ran on very irregular shifts. You had to be there when the mainframe was running batch processes, which was often overnight.
So if he told his wife he had to work late,
she would never question it. Oh, I have to monitor a batch run. I have to go to the city for a system check. It gave him a valid, unchallengeable reason to be leaving the house at odd hours.
A reason to be commuting into New York City.
And crucially, it paid well. His white-collar salary funded his dark habits. The job was, in a way, his accomplice.
And then you layer on the domestic timeline. I mean, it just makes your skin crawl.
He gets married to his wife, Janet, in 1970. A big church wedding in Queens.
They move to Lodi, then Little Ferry in Jersey. And while he's literally murdering women, he's having children. Blair is born in 73, Scott in 75, Jenny in 76.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the visualization of his life, and it's two separate timelines running in parallel. Top line, baby is born. Bottom line, murder is committed. They're happening almost simultaneously.
And the neighbors saw a quiet loner. They saw a dad changing diapers. They saw a guy washing his car on the weekend. They never, ever saw the monster.
Which suggests this profound psychological dissociation.
It's not just hiding a hobby. He was living two fully realized, completely incompatible existences. When he was at home, he was dad. When he was out, he was the torso killer. And there was no bleed-through.
But those two worlds had to touch somewhere, and it was through the commute, right? What you call the triangle of death.
It's a grim kind of geometry. You have point A, the home base in New Jersey. That's where he sleeps, where his kids are. But it's also where he often dumped bodies to put distance between them and the abduction site.
Okay, then point B is the hunting ground.
Manhattan. The city gave him total anonymity. You could just disappear into the crowds in New York in the 70s.
In point C.
Point C is the transit, the commute itself, the bus routes, the transit corridors. He used that journey to and from work to troll for victims. He was the commuter killer in the most literal sense. His journey to work was a hunting expedition.
So as we move into the late 70s, the story shifts gears again. We move away from the suburbs and the malls and into the real grit of the city, the torso era. This is where he earns the nickname that made him infamous.
We are entering the era of the Deuce, Times Square, the late 70s. It's hard to even describe to people who only know the Disney version of Times Square today.
It was a different world.
Completely. This was peep shows, grindhouse theaters, a whole vice economy. It was an environment of impunity. And Cottingham thrived there. He was a regular at bars like the Melody and the Spearman.
And his MO changes here again. He moves from cars into hotels.
The hotel hell.
Yeah.
He would lure sex workers or other vulnerable women to these hot sheet hotels, places like the Travel Inn or the Seville Hotel.
Places that rented rooms by the hour.
Exactly. They didn't ask questions. They dealt in cash. They looked the other way.
And this is where the violence really escalates from murder to something else, what you called performative desecration.
That's the only term for it. I mean, look at December 1979. He checks into the Travel Inn with Dita Godarzi and another woman we still only know as Jane Doe. He tortures and kills them. But then, to prevent identification, he severs their heads and their hands.
It's horrific.
He sets the room on fire to destroy any evidence. He leaves them as just torsos. It's an impossible, horrific puzzle for the NYPD.
And then in May 1980, with Marianne Jean Rayner at the Seville Hotel, it gets even worse.
He placed body parts on the headboards.
Why? I mean, I know there's no good reason, but psychologically, what is that? Is it just to taunt the cops?
No, the cops are secondary to him. It's about trophies. Cottingham didn't just kill. He took things. Jewelry, personal items, and in these cases, parts of the victims themselves.
Right.
Former FBI profiler Candace DeLong has analyzed this. It's a key indicator of sexual sadism. The killer gets gratification not just from the act itself, but from the memory of the act.
So the trophy, whether it's a necklace or a visual memory like Alys Eberhardt's clothing, it allows him to relive the kill.
Exactly. It lets him expend the fantasy. He integrates the power of that moment into his daily life. He could be sitting at his desk at Blue Cross Blue Shield, holding a piece of jewelry in his pocket, reliving a murder while talking to a colleague about, I don't know, spreadsheets.
That is a terrifying thought. The secret in his pocket. Which brings us to the victims themselves. There's this stereotype that Cottingham only targeted sex workers, especially because of that Times Square connection. But looking at the full list, that's just not true at all.
No, it's a dangerous misconception. He was an opportunistic predator. He would hunt anyone he thought was vulnerable. But you can really identify three main archetypes of victims he went after.
Okay, let's run through them. First, you have the respectable, professional, or student.
Right, like Alys Eberhardt, the nursing student, or Diane Cusick, the young mom. These were women engaged in wholesome activities, nursing school, buying shoes for their kids. He hunted them in malls near hospitals. And he used that authority ruse we talked about.
Then you have the second group, which does fit the Times Square narrative.
The sex worker or transient. Women who are on the margins of society. Dita Godarzi, Marianne Jean Rayner. For them, he used a transactional lure.
Meaning he acted like a customer.
He acted like a normal customer. He used money and the promise of privacy to get them into a room where he had total, absolute control.
And the third group. This one feels the most disconnected from the others.
Teenagers.
Yeah.
Adolescents. We have to remember Marianne Pryor and Lorena Ree Kelly in 1974. They were 17 and 16 years old, just walking to a mall in New Jersey.
And he abducted them.
He abducted them and held them captive.
Captive? For how long?
For days. This shows he wasn't just a blitz attacker who strikes and leaves. He was capable of prolonged captivity scenarios. He eventually drowned them in a motel bathtub. Just shows the versatility of his cruelty.
What strikes me is the common thread here. Why did they trust him? Why did Diane Cusick get in the car? Why would those teenagers go with him?
Because he looked normal. We cannot overstate this. His normality was his most lethal weapon.
It was his camouflage.
The ultimate camouflage. He looked like a white-collar professional, a dad, a guy who worked in computers. He didn't trigger your stranger danger alarm until it was already too late, until he had already closed the physical distance he needed to strike.
So how do you catch a man like that? A man who blends in so perfectly. As it turns out, it's not some high-tech dragnet.
No.
You catch him because of a scream.
The downfall, when it finally came on May 20th, 1980, was remarkably low-tech. He was at the Quality Inn in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey, and he had a victim in the room, an 18-year-old named Leslie Ann Odell.
And she screamed.
She screamed, and a maid heard her. That maid is the hero of this story. She didn't ignore it. She alerted management. They called the police.
What did they find when they got there?
The scene was straight out of a horror movie. Leslie Ann Odell was alive, but she was handcuffed, gagged, and had bite marks, which was one of Cottingham's signatures.
And in his bag, they found a torture kit.
Yeah, handcuffs, leather restraints, a knife. But the real smoking gun was actually the handcuffs themselves. Forensics found a fingerprint on the ratchet mechanism of the cuffs, the inside part.
And that print linked him to
It linked him to a previous murder, that of Valerie Street. And that was the single thread that allowed investigators to unravel the whole sweater.
So since 1980, he's been in prison. And this leads to this strange afterlife of Richard Cottingham. He didn't just go away quietly. He started playing
The
games.
transactional truth. That's what I call it. Cottingham realized that in prison, his only form of currency was his secrets. So he started using confessions to get privileges, or honestly, just to break the sheer boredom of prison life.
And we have to talk about Detective Robert Ancelotti. He spent years talking to this guy.
Ancelotti, the former Bergen County chief of detectives, he understood the assignment. He knew Cottingham saw himself as a professional. So Ancelotti didn't interrogate him, he debriefed him. He treated him like an equal.
And that's how he got him to talk.
And through that strange relationship, he closed multiple cold cases, including the murders of Marianne Pryor and Lorraine Kelly.
But the most surreal relationship Cottingham has is with Jennifer Weiss.
This is a truly unique situation. Jennifer Weiss is the biological daughter of Didi Goodarzi, one of the Times Square victims.
The woman who was decapitated.
Yes, she was adopted at birth and sought Cottingham out to learn about the mother she never knew.
Can you even imagine sitting across from the man who murdered your mother like that?
It's unimaginable courage.
Yeah.
But a strange, very uneasy friendship formed. Jennifer uses her position to guilt him, to coax him. She tells him to give up the names for the families. She appeals to whatever shred of humanity or perhaps just legacy building he has left.
So here we are, it's 2026. The Alys Eberhardt case is finally closed. Cottingham is an old man, probably in the prison infirmary. What does all this mean now?
Well, we have to look at the numbers. We have about 20 confirmed convictions or solid confessions on the books. But Cottingham himself claims somewhere between 80 and 100 victims.
That is a massive gap. That's potentially 80 people.
It's a justice gap. For every Michael Smith, who was Alyssa's nephew and finally got closure this month, there are 4 or 5 other families who are still completely in the dark.
Families who still wonder what happened to their sister or their daughter back in 1972 or 1969.
Exactly.
It's a chilling legacy. Cottingham really represents the terrifying banality of evil. He proves that a monster can wear a suit, commute to a respectable job, raise a family, and just walk among us completely unnoticed.
He does. And the Alys Eberhardt confession coming 61 years late. It's this powerful reminder that the truth can be incredibly patient.
I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We look at a guy like Richard Cottingham, and we think he has to be an anomaly, a rare monster. But as we close the file on a crime that was hidden in plain sight for 6 decades, it forces us to ask a really provocative question.
How many other respectable commuters in the history of the American suburbs were actually monsters in disguise?
And how many of their crimes were never solved simply because the guy in the suit and tie just didn't fit the profile?
That is the question that keeps me up at night.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.